You are universal consciousness. But you're not fully aware of that yet. You think you're a human. So human is a distinction within universal consciousness. You see that? Now, what does this have to do with free will? Well, you see, freedom is a distinction you're imagining within this field of consciousness. So you're imagining freedom on the one hand, and then its opposite, which is a lack of freedom on the other hand, or in other words, you might say constraint, or something like determinism. You might hold that as the opposite of freedom. Furthermore, you're imagining something like will, and then the opposite of will, not will. That's also a distinction you're creating. And you're imagining a distinction between control versus lack of control. Or we might also frame it as controller versus the thing that it is controlling. Controller versus controlled. So when you're asking this question, does a human have free will? What you're basically doing is you're taking a universal field of consciousness, the entire universe, you're subdividing that into a part, such as a human, this human here, but not that human there, or not that chair, or not that table, or not the planet Earth, or some other thing. And then you're asking the question, okay, so if I'm just this little part of the universe, who controls that part? Do I control my own part? And how does my personal control over my little part of the universe relate to the universe at large? Do I control myself, or does the universe control me? That's another way to frame the question. On the one hand, it seems like the universe controls me. Because, like, for example, I don't control my DNA. Ordinarily, that's how we think. I don't control when I was born. I don't control who my parents were. I don't control when I get hit in a car crash by somebody else. So in that sense, I don't have control. On the other hand, I seem to have control over the universe. I can steer the steering wheel of my car and cause my car to move in different directions. I can choose to go to the gym or to be lazy and not go to the gym. I can choose to get married and have children or not. I can choose which food to eat or not. And in this way, it seems like I'm controlling the universe. In fact, I could build my own house if I wanted to. That would be me manipulating and controlling the universe. So do humans control the universe, or does the universe control humans? Well, of course, it's not a simple either-or choice. Something much more nuanced is going on here. I want you to appreciate how delicate and sensitive this question is. The problem here is that the ego mind fundamentally wants to believe that it is in control. That is the function of the ego mind. That is the function of the small human self-identity, the lowercase u identity. You need to feel like you're in control of at least some portion of your life, because if you don't, notice what happens. There's actually emotional consequences. You get depressed, you get frustrated, you get angry, you get emotional. You start to feel like a victim in life. And there are some people in life who seem to have a lot of control over life and their own selves. And then there are other people who don't have a lot of control, and they're like helpless victims. They can't do anything. They can even barely motivate themselves to wake up in the morning and go to work because they're so out of control. Now, the trick here, though, is that it's all about how you define what you is. You see, ordinarily when we say, well, do I have control over life? We just take the you part of that question for granted. But on that question hinges everything, hinges the whole answer. For example, science cannot answer this question because science doesn't have a deep enough appreciation of the relativity of the you identity. Science just assumes that, well, you is a given. You means you're a human. Not so fast. What if there's other definitions of what you is, larger definitions? So you see, the problem is that if we consider for a moment the whole universe, everything that could ever possibly exist, everything. If you're going to define you as any subset of that, if you're a little human within the universe, if there's a distinction in your mind between you and the world, if you think you're separate or different from the world, or if you think that you're separate or different from others, other conscious agents in the world, see, you're defining yourself as something less than the entirety of the universe. If you do that, by definition, you cannot have control over the entire universe because you're a portion of it, not the whole thing. You are like one molecule within a hurricane. If the universe is the whole hurricane, a human is like one molecule or one particle flying around. And in that sense, it seems like the universe and the world controls you, even though you might struggle to control sometimes your own trajectory. The reality is that the majority of your trajectory in life is not controlled by you. The planet is orbiting the sun. The sun is orbiting some other galaxy or the center of the Milky Way. And how much control do you have as a human over that process? None. So you see, your control is very localized within the whole universe. But that's only if you define yourself as that little human you. If you assume that that's a physical fact, an objective fact, but what if it isn't? What if identity is a metaphysical thing, not a physical thing, and that it's relativistic in that you can change what you identify yourself to be? So if you change your identity from that of a human to that of the entire universe, if somehow you could make that shift in your consciousness, then that would change the whole question and how you look at this question and what the answer is. Because if we take the universe as a whole and we ask the question, who controls the universe as a whole? You can see that it's a very interesting and a different kind of question. Because when you're considering some part of the universe that is not the whole, then you can always appeal to something outside of that part as a controller of that part. So literally, what controls your physical XYZ coordinates in physical space? It would be the motion of the planet Earth and the sun around the center of the Milky Way. And since you define yourself as not the Earth and not the sun and not the Milky Way, that means you don't actually control your XYZ coordinates in space. You control a tiny portion of it, but not the majority of it. Because even as I was sitting here talking, already, scientifically speaking, you and I have moved through space. XYZ coordinates, our XYZ coordinates have moved, even though we're sitting here not moving. The Earth and the sun have all moved hundreds and maybe thousands of kilometers just in the last few minutes as I've been talking. And you don't control that because you don't define that as being part of what you are. But see, what's interesting is that if you expand your idea of what you are to becoming the entire universe, and you ask the question, well, who controls the entire universe? See, now you can't make an appeal to something outside of the universe controlling the universe. Because the universe, the way we're defining it here, is this elastic notion which is totalistic. It's all-encompassing. The entire universe. Everything that could possibly exist. Universe with an uppercase U. So, who controls the universe? Well, obviously, nothing outside the universe can control the universe because the universe has no outside. Because outside and inside itself is a distinction imagined by the universe. The universe being an infinite field of consciousness. Since the universe has no outside, only inside, everything by definition is inside the universe, and it has no outer edge, it expands to infinity, that means the only thing that can control the universe is itself. The universe is self-controlled.